XAVY ignores our kids for his stepkids, blames me for their distance. Am I the bad guy for saying they're justified in feeling fatherless? Originally, I'm 33 and have 2 kids, 12 and 8. I divorced their dad when I discovered he was cheating on me with a mom from our younger son's school group. Despite that betrayal, I agreed to shared custody because I wanted my kids to grow up with their father in their life. However, since the divorce, he's only been around when he's picking them up for VY sits. He often goes out with his stepchildren, but rarely includes our kids, claiming those outings are spur of the moment and can't always include them. Eventually, I stopped pushing, but I've always thought it was unfair that he keeps his distance from our children's lives. Recently, I decided to upgrade my older son's computer, and he asked if we could give his old one to his cousin, my brother's son. My brother has been a huge support for my kids. He's always available to take them to their school events when I can, and often takes them out to the park or for trips when I'm busy. My ex, on the other hand, is rarely available. Anytime I ask him to help with an active VY tie, he has an excuse. He's out of town or swamped with. Ironically, though, whenever his stepkids need something, he's there. Once, he even argued with his stepkid's father at a school event, insisting he had the right to be there. When my ex found out I gave the computer to my nephew, he got upset. He complained that if I had money to spare on a gift like that, I should have forgiven 2 months of child support he'd missed, since his finances were tight with a new baby. He added that if I could give away a computer, I should have gifted it to either his kids or his stepkids, who shared just one computer among the 3 of them. I told him my finances were none of his business and that I owed nothing to his stepchildren. Then his wife jumped into the conversation, accusing me of spoiling my son by giving him a new computer and of being petty for letting my son bring it to the house, claiming it was just a show-off in front of his step-sibling. I told her she had no right to speak to me that way or question my decision. I added that I allow my kids to see their father so they can grow up with him in their lives, not so she can interfere with how I parent. XAVY was offended, but I told him this whole situation could have been avoided if his wife hadn't inserted herself where she doesn't belong. After that, things seemed to calm down until last week. I went to pick up the kids, and my ex was visibly upset. He explained that he tried reading a bedtime story to our youngest. He still likes to be read to before bed, usually by me, his brother, or my brother, and when none of us are around, he listens to audiobooks. Apparently, XAVY wanted to make an effort to, so he offered to read to him, but our son turned him down, saying he didn't need him for that because he could do it himself. XAVY stayed to listen as he searched for a story for 8-year-olds without a dad on his tablet, and it hit him hard. The next day, XAVY offered to take our older son to basketball practice, but he replied that he'd be going with his dad. He quickly corrected himself and said, "Uncle." That made my ex even angrier, and when I came to pick up the kids, he confronted me about it. I told him that if our kids feel like they don't have a father, he has only himself to blame. He tried to shift the blame onto me, saying I was the one pushing him away from his. I told him it's up to him to show up for his kids, not something I can do for him. I reminded him he was the one who broke our family, and he's chosen to be more involved with his stepkids than with his own children. I told him not to kid himself. The kids are growing up, and they're starting to see the reality of who he is as a father. If he keeps this up, he can't expect much from them in the future. After the exchange, his mom called me. While she's always been polite to me, I felt the need to say that I would have appreciated the same concern from her when she supported her son's affair, knowing her grandchildren were losing their father in the process. She hung up, and we haven't spoken since. My brother AdVY said me that I had every right to express how I feel, but he suggested that maybe this discussion shouldn't have happened in front of the kid. Later, XAVY texted me, saying that if I weren't so difficult, he'd spend more time with them. I told him his duty as a father doesn't depend on whether it's easy or not, and he knows I've never prevented him from seeing the kid. The truth is, when he has to choose, he prefers outings with his stepkids over his own children, and that's something only he can change. Comments, lap steel guitar. You can only do so much OP, and don't let him off the hook for any child support. The fact that it's stretching his budget is a him problem, not you problem. And I agree with your brother that that conversation should not have happened in front of the kids. But if I understand correctly, your ex chose the time and place, not GIVYing you much choice in. NTA. Amazing Reserve 989. I love how if she had extra money, she should forgive child support, but him already knowing money was tight wasn't a reason to not have another. Ancient Wishbone 4621. My ex stayed to listen as he searched for a story for 8-year-olds without a dad on his tablet. Your kid is ruthless. Good for him. NTA. Judgment. NTA. Update 11 days later. These past days have been a bit unusual. First, I want to thank all of you. I didn't expect to receive so much advice, and I never thought this app would be so useful. It's not very popular in my country. Now back to the topic. My ex sent me messages saying he wanted to resolve things, stop arguing, and talk to me. I agreed. He came to my house, and we didn't beat around the bush. We went straight to the point. He asked me if I really thought he was a bad father. I replied that looking back now, I never would have chosen him to be the father of my children. He said it wasn't easy for him, and I answered that it wasn't easy for me either, because I take on both his role and mom. He told me he couldn't leave his stepchildren without a father because he had already broken their family, and I replied that he had left his own children without a father. He started crying and told me it was my fault, saying that when the infidelity happened, I refused to forgive him or go to couples therapy. I kept telling him things. I'll admit they weren't kind, but none of them were lies. He asked me if given his current state, I didn't feel sorry for him, and I said no. He told me he didn't think I could be so cruel, and I replied that when I changed jobs, pulled my kids out of school 2 months before the end of the term, moved houses, and watched him disappoint our kids over and over again. Any empathy I might have felt turned into apathy. He left after that. His mother called me and said she knew what I had told her son, that he hadn't stopped crying, and that she didn't understand how I could carry so much hatred to hurt her son like that. She said I should just get over it. I answered with all due respect. What I said wasn't out of hatred, but out of truth. If your son is crying, it's because he's finally facing the consequences of his actions. Maybe instead of worrying about how he feels now, you should have taught him to take responsibility and treat people with respect. She said I didn't know what it was like to feel a mother's love and see a child suffer. And I replied that I did understand because I have 2 children who cry over a leave-vying father, 2 children who see their dad being a father to other kids when he doesn't have time to be their father. She said he was sorry, and I told her not to put words in his mouth and to stop calling me about anything related to her son. I hung up. I wanted to cry so badly, but I'm a damned mother, and I don't have time for that. I want my kids to feel safe, loved, and strong enough not to need anyone, not even me, to be themselves. Last Thursday, I took my kids to their cousin's birthday party hosted by my ex-sister. I still have a good relationship with her. She was the one who told me about the infidelity and that her mother was already encouraging it. XAVY showed up alone and irritated. My kids kept their distance from him. They kissed his hand, but then ignored him completely. My ex-mother-in-law told the kids they should show more respect to their father, and my eldest replied that he doesn't show respect for me, since he and his partner talk badly about it. I scolded my son, not for what he said, but for how he addressed his grandmother. I told him it was wrong to eavesdrop on private conversations and repeat them. Then I asked him to gather his things because we were Leah-vying. My ex-mother-in-law asked me not to leave, saying the kids were ha-vying fun and we could resolve this as a... She asked my ex what he had said, and he claimed not to remember. I told her I didn't care, and she said we should be good parents. I replied that to be good parents, you need to be good people first. XAVY was getting agitated. My ex-mother-in-law asked why we couldn't have a CIVY Liz co-parenting relationship. I told her everything I've mentioned here about his free will to see the kids and how the second custody agreement isn't working since he only sees them some weekend. XAVY didn't want to discuss it, saying he had too many kids at home. My ex-mother-in-law told him the only kids who should feel comfortable are his, and the comfort of the others should be pro-VY dead by their biological father. XAVY wanted to end the conversation because his mother was scolding him for being a careless father. He also said it was my fault. I asked him to clarify how it was my fault. You can see the kids whenever you want. What more do you want? He started yelling, claiming I was only being petty because I didn't really need the money, since I earned more than him and had fewer kids to feed. I told him I wouldn't continue the conversation and that I'd show him what being unsci-VY Liz looks like by filing for the overdue child support payment. His mother asked what I meant by overdue payments. I explained that he was 3 months behind. She was furious, slapped him, and demanded to know what he had done with the money for his children. He answered, I couldn't let Junior miss out on attending the same school as my son. I didn't want him to feel inferior. My ex-mother-in-law said she couldn't believe it, and they started arguing. I left. Yet for context, my youngest son attends a private school, and my ex pays for his stepson to attend the same school. Yesterday, my ex-mother-in-law came over and said she would pay the overdue fees. She brought the money in cash. I knew my ex would be furious. Here's some context. My ex-mother-in-law doesn't work, doesn't own anything herself, and lives with my ex-sister-in-law. However, she does have significant SAVYNGS from. If she pays the tuition, my ex knows there won't be much left for him when she passes, even though she's still healthy. He's been asking her for years to invest some of that money in his business bus ideas, but she's always refused. XAVY's retaliation was not picking up the kids this. Yesterday, my ex-sister-in-law called me. She doesn't know all the details yet, but apparently my ex's 15-year-old stepson punched him in the mouth. She said she'll let me know exactly what happened when she finds out. And before anyone asks, the new custody agreement will likely take a year to finalize. The court says the overdue payments are the priority, and the rest can wait. We have more urgent cases. Comments. SN will offers $4.96. At least his mama finally got some sense. Her son is a piece of glass girl 1021. He OBVY usly fed her a line of when she was defending. Odor welcome 7,904. When the EVYL mill turns on her spoiled child, you know he was 100 fan tram wrong. It's not even a question of perspective anymore. Unusual Potato 155. The chef's kiss was being punched by the stepson. He prioritizes his own kids over bet. He feels utterly ridiculous. Update 1 day later. A promise is a promise. As I mentioned earlier, my ex's stepson had an altercation with him because my ex refused to let him go. Now I have more details. My ex's stepson had plans to go bowling with some friends. His biological father had already given him permission and money for the outing. However, when he told his mother, she said he couldn't go because they needed him to stay home and watch his younger sibling. My ex and his wife had planned an outing and needed someone to stay with the kid. This led to an argument. The boy raised his voice to his mother, and my ex stepped in to demand that he respect her. The boy replied that he wasn't his father. Trying to maintain authority, my ex told him that as long as he lived under his roof, he had to follow his rules. The boy ignored him and turned away. XAVY followed him and touched his shoulder to get his attention. At that moment, the boy turned around, punched him, and shouted that he wasn't his father and could never compare to him. The mother scolded him for his BHVY, but the boy, still angry, shouted back that he hated. This version was shared by my ex and his wife to my ex-mother-in-law. My sister-in-law later related it to me. They went to see my ex-mother-in-law to try to gain her sympathy and NCE her to take care of the kids, the 2 stepchildren and the baby, so they could go out. However, my ex-mother-in-law told them she would not take care of the children. When I spoke to my ex, he mentioned he was dealing with family issues and claimed that the boy's biological father was turning him against. He didn't give me many details and omitted most of what my sister-in-law had shared. He simply informed me that due to the situation, he wouldn't be able to pick up our children this week. The 15-year-old boy is now staying with his biological father. As for what I mentioned earlier, my ex was 2 months behind on child support, and that same week he was supposed to make another payment. He didn't, Leah VYing him 3 months behind. In the end, his mother was the one who covered the overdue. Regarding the child who attends the same school as my son, it's not the 15-year-old involved in the altercation. It's his younger stepbrother, who is 8 years old, the same age as my son. I decided to enroll my son in that school when the affair became public. At the time, I was working as a kindergarten teacher at the same school, and the boy had been one of my students. We all knew each other, and to protect my children from rumors, I transferred them to a private school. This happened 2 months before the school year ended. Thanks to the circumstances and the support of some kind people, we managed to get them admitted. Comments. Drum 123. So even after the punch and the argument, they still wanted to go out? What a pathetic excuse for parents. I hope their marriage eventually falls apart. Carolina Mama 2015. Not only did they want to go out, but it's funny how he had money to take his new wife out, but not pay child support for his 2 bio children. Whatever 53, 1143. I think it's funny that because of the altercation, he said he couldn't take his own children for the. So the 15-year-old was right. The man would never compare comp to the kid's father. The kid's own father is a better man. Libra Harper Serene. A true father would prioritize his children's needs, especially during a conflict. Instead, he uses the situation to avoid his responsibilities. Now to the next story. Story 2. I laughed at Lewis. I got Yin and VY Ted to the baby shower I planned. Now my sister finally chose a sensible name for her baby. Originally, my sister is due in early January, and we're planning her baby shower for early December. She decided she wanted to use my mother's maiden name, Lawrencey, as her daughter's name. Not a tragedy in itself, and I guess it works as a unique name. But yesterday I texted my sister that I needed to get the custom items with my niece's name ordered ASAP so they would arrive in time for the shower. My sister then let me know they're going with an alternative spelling of Lawrencey. I texted back, an alternative spelling of our mother's maiden name? My sister wants to spell it Laurie, so I sent back a bunch of laughing emojis, and she asked what was so funny. I tried to explain that no one will pronounce that as Lawrencey, and she'll probably get plenty of the same mispronunciations. She told me I was being ridiculous. I texted back, my poor niece, little Miss Lardy? I was yin and VY Ted to the shower. My mom told me today my sister doesn't want me as the godmother anymore, but like Laurie is really bad, isn't it? Someone needs to tell her, right? Update. I don't know if updates are allowed here, but here it is, and sorry it's long, and I've been VYing a hard time submitting. Is there a character limit? I'll try posting some and put the rest in the comments. So we had an intervention on Laurie. I know everyone said to send a link to the original post of my sister to show her that 103 fan tram of the global population would call her daughter Lardy, and that would be the easiest thing to do, but some commenters said some pretty gnarly things about my sister that she doesn't need to read and feel worse about herself. But I wanted to address a few things that came up. First, for those saying I shouldn't bother paying for the baby shower anymore, I had no plans to not continue to pay and help out. Disagreements and fighting aside, I love my sister and want her to go in a motherhood filled with love and support, regardless of whether she wants my support or attendance. Second, my sister's husband was made aware of the spelling change of Lawrencey to Laurie about a month before my original. He said he didn't think much of it until he saw it written down and immediately saw it as Lardy too. He said her emotions had been getting worse throughout the pregnancy, and he didn't know how to approach her about going back to the original spelling. He had hoped that once she gave birth, all the hormones would somehow leave her body, she'd come to her senses, and it would be a non-issue. Third, a lot of you were lumping my mom in with my sister, said some pretty horrible things about her too. All my mom knew was from my sister calling her to complain that I laughed at her for slightly changing the spelling. My mom just assumed it was a minor change like Lawrencey until I told her to grab a pen and paper and I'd spell it out for her. Once she saw it was Laurie, she was team save this child. Now, for those of you who told me I didn't have any tact and my reaction was mean, my reaction was because, 1, people would call the poor girl Lardy her entire life for the sake of my sister being quirky. 2, pregnancy brain aside, surely my sister would realize her child will be called Lardy once it's pointed out, have a laugh, change her mind, and this will end up being a funny story to tell at her daughter's future wedding or something. And 3, my sister is a bit of a joker, so I also initially thought she was just pulling a prank or joking, but if she was joking, she took the joke really, really far. She spent $400 on a mural painted on one wall in the nursery. She wanted to debut the finished nursery to everyone at the baby shower, including her husband, who was forbidden to see it beforehand, that had Laurie incorporated into it, that now needs to be repainted. She also bought herself a birthing gift. Is this even a thing? She'd have my brother-in-law present to her in front of everyone at the hospital. A Dulon 1900 plus gold bracelet with LA RI charms. The baby book also has Laurie embroidered on the cover. I contacted my sister's best friend, Kendra, not her real name, if my sister has told her anything about the spelling change. She found out about Laurie after the blow-up with my sister, as my sister wanted to get Kendra on her side. Kendra, who's a teacher, was equally horrified about the spelling and told me this is the worst attempt at a creative name she's ever seen. The intervention of sorts, the Lardy party, if you will, included me, my sister, her husband, his mother and father, my mother, and Kendra. My sister refused to believe anyone could possibly see Laurie as Lardy and that we were just mad that she was taking creative license and that everyone does that now. My sister said children are not that cruel to bully her daughter for her name. Kendra said plenty of kids are cruel enough and the others would join in so they're not singled out themselves. My sister countered that as long as all the adults are pronouncing it correctly, that it'll be no problem, and Kendra told her that not only would the adults not know how to pronounce it, but that as long as fart is in the name, kids will latch right onto that. I was happy Kendra was there because she shared interesting names her students have had over the past few years, so I knew her opinion on this would probably be the only one to sway her. My sister cried for about 10 minutes and finally agreed to entirely change the name because even Lawrencey was tainted because we had all ruined it for her. We told her to take her time to consider a new name. She told us she still wanted to honor my mother, and she suggested she'd combine my mother's first name with her mother-in-law's name and created a name on the spot that included a CRFD term for a lesbian. When my mother pointed that out, she started crying again and accused us of not letting her be a mom. And her husband suggested we leave it for now and we should all go and give her space. It's been radio silence until my sister texted me a couple of hours ago that she and her husband landed on Matilda, and she is absolutely in love with it. She even decided that my unborn niece looks like Matilda in the ultrasound. She got those creepy 3D ones done, where every baby looks like the same copper potato. I replied that that was lovely, and that I'm so happy she's happy. It's not my taste, but at least it's not Matildaru or some crap like that. So there you go. My niece has been saved from being called Lardy. I'm in VY Ted to the baby shower again, and I know this is just a little blip with my relationship to my sister, and we'll be fine, but Kendra will be taking over as godmother, which is fine by me. I can always be godmother to their next child, who will probably be named something like Tiramisu. Thank you all for seeing the same thing I did, and letting me know stopping Laurie from coming into existence was the right thing to do. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you.